Welcome to The Fourth Bottom Line, the podcast where we meet people from business, charities and politics who are a force for good. In each episode, I'll be asking my guests about the pain and failures that have resulted in the internal changes that have made them the unique individuals they are. So if you desire change in yourself and the world around you, keep listening. Hello, my name is Paul Hargreaves. I'm the CEO of Cotswold Fair and Flourish, two businesses that put people and planet before profit. We were one of the first B Corps in the UK in 2015, and I've written two books, Forces for Good and The Fourth Bottom Line. I realised a few years ago that if we really were going to change the world for better, we would also need to change ourselves. The outer impact of people, planet and profit had to be mirrored by an inner change, and that's what I call my fourth bottom line.
I'm kind of answerable to people who are much less fortunate than any of us. Therefore, we have no right to complain. We have to do a bit better than we did yesterday. The reason the brand was called One was because I set out to change one person's life one day at a time. Yes, we've done 5 million, but could it have been 10? Could it have been 20 million? For me, that's a failure in some ways, because it's like, well, actually, what could I have done better that would have changed somebody else's life?
My guest today is Duncan Goose. Duncan is the founder of the One brand and the One Foundation, which to date has raised over £30 million and changed the lives of over 5 million people through giving them access to clean drinking water. Duncan launched One after being caught in Hurricane Mitch in Honduras in 1998 and experiencing life without access to drinking water. On that trip, he was also shot at in Mexico, told he would go blind after a collision with a deer in Canada, rescued by the police on the Afghan border, and experienced 7.9 magnitude earthquake 5 stories up in a building in Indonesia. He says, "I count myself lucky to be alive and have a tattoo to remind me of that daily. Life is a gift. We should all embrace all of it. And when things get hard, we often don't have a benchmark for what hard really is." Duncan has won numerous awards, including a Great Britain Award, yet remains one of the most humble people I know. Duncan, welcome to the Fourth Bottom Line.
Thank you very much for having me.
And I'd start these podcasts talking about your childhood and early years, but we can't do that this time because that's such a dramatic introduction. I've got to ask you, who was shooting at you and why?
So it was in Baja, Mexico, and I was riding a motorbike, so that's part of the story, I suppose. But in those days, I used to smoke, and I was riding through Baja, and if you've ever been there, there's lots of police checkpoints along the way. And one policeman had said, the next part of this road is very dangerous. There's a lot of bandits there, don't stop. And of course, being sort of young and slightly stupid, I decided that I wanted to stop for a cigarette. And unfortunately, some guy pulled a gun and was predominantly with presumably with the intent of robbing me, and then pulled the trigger. And I have to say, it's a very slow motion experience. And I don't smoke anymore. It's much safer.
And where did the bullet go?
I don't know. I ducked down behind the motorbike, and by the time I got up, he ran. So whether he thought I was going to clobber him or something, I don't know. But anyway.
The vision that came to mind is one of those guns that is a cigarette lighter. Then
no. It was the real thing.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to get onto that trip a bit later, but before that, let's talk about your childhood. Where were you born? What was your family like?
So I was born in Edinburgh, as were my two younger sisters. My dad was a maxillofacial surgeon based in Edinburgh. And there you go. Yeah, so I was born and brought up there, left there at the age of 10, and moved down to North Norfolk, where I spent most of my childhood, I suppose. And it was an amazing place to grow up. It's, if you're a kid, you've got beaches and woodland, and give yourself a bicycle and off you go, and just continue to explore. So I was very lucky to grow up in that environment. A lot of, as I said, cycling, going to the beach, sailing, just mucking about. And very different from my kids today living in London, which they don't have those kind of freedoms, unfortunately. But
And your mum, what's she?
Mum was a mum.
Yeah.
And but actually, when the kids got a little bit older, she started her second business. So she had a business before the kids were born, which was a fabric shop in Norfolk as well. And in those days, when people were making a lot of clothes, that was the business that she was in, was providing that service. And then she started a second business when the kids were a bit older, which she carried on with a good friend of hers for many years, doing a lot of event decorating and things like that. So perhaps those sort of early entrepreneurial things come from her, perhaps.
Happy childhood.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, very, very fortunate to have had the childhood that we had. Yeah.
And what were the values that were instilled in you as a child?
In some ways, I think it was probably a grandparent thing more than a parental thing. My grandfather on my dad's side was a farmer by profession, and but he talked a lot about the days of the Second World War, where they used to have German soldiers that would come and work on the farm. So rather than being put in intern camps, they actually became farm labourers. And he went on to become a police chief constable. He was mayor of North Norfolk. And for him, and really right up until he died at the age of 90, I mean, he was still working when he was 85, and would spend a lot of time working with local government and really campaigning for people and their rights, and was a great advocate for doing the right thing, I suppose.
So someone I talked to as part of my research for this, because I was asking him where that kind of drive for doing good came from, and he said it was your grandfather. That would be this same grandfather.
Same grandfather. Yeah. And my grandmother on my mother's side, she was an ambassador for UNICEF. And so as kids, we were brought up a lot with social purpose, if you want to call it that. We used to go to Bernardo's parties, fundraisers for Bernardo's. We all had Bernardo's boxes that we had to fill up with spare pocket money. We were encouraged to go and spend time with local elderly people. And so I think I got that. I think I got that from both sides of the family. And
it's all coming to place here. I mean, we share a dad who was a surgeon, but that was where the commonality ended.
Yeah,
we did nothing like that. That is probably quite unusual. I don't know if you might not be aware of that. I don't think that is normal.
I don't know. I mean, it felt sort of very normal to us, I suppose.
Our own lives are normal,
yeah,
aren't they?
and I guess if you look back, if I look back at where my life is now, and I track it right back to sort of very young days, there was a lot of those sort of seeds that were implanted at quite a young age. I think we were encouraged to be quite independent. I went to boarding school for about 6 years, and I moved around. Actually, went to 7 different schools for a variety of reasons, but I went to one boarding school for 6 years, and I think that instilled a lot in me as well. So we were encouraged, to go and chart our own course, and so we did some crazy things, like we tried to create the Guinness World Record for the longest 3-legged walk, which involved an awful lot of boys walking down a beach in Aldborough, most of them getting swept out to sea.
I know that beach, actually.
Yeah. And so, I mean, lots of great stuff from my childhood, for sure.
I'll come back to the boarding school in a minute. But was there a spiritual dimension to your childhood?
I would say no, but that's changed and evolved over time. So there wasn't any. I mean, certainly when I went to boarding school, we went to church 6 days a week. Actually, we went to church 7 days a week, but the Saturday was always the rehearsal for the Sunday.
It's enough to put you off, isn't it?
But I've always believed in something being there, and I think I'm a massive believer in fate or predetermined, whatever you want to call that. And I think sometimes that gives you a lot of comfort when things are going particularly wrong, that this is just part of your journey, and you kind of relax into it and wait to see what that lesson is and what you can learn from it. And so whether, that comes from some spiritual upbringing or not, I don't know. But I think that inherently that's always been part of my life.
I want to go back to, so boarding school. What age were you at boarding school?
10.
That's young, isn't it?
It's young. Yeah, I look at my kids at the age of 10 and I was like, I'm not sure I'd shove them out the door.
No, I certainly wouldn't.
Yeah, so it was circumstantial because where we were in North Norfolk, there weren't very many options for schools. It actually changed by the time my two sisters were a sort of secondary age. There was a grammar school that had opened up about an hour's drive away. And so I ended up going there for sixth form rather than to continue to board. So,
I mean, I've talked to two people fairly recently, actually, both of whom went to boarding school, I think from 8.
Yeah, it's young.
Even younger. And both of them were quite resentful about that. Well, how do you feel about being carted off at the age of 10?
I think, again, you don't really know what you're getting into at that age. And at that point, I suppose I'd been to 2 different schools in Edinburgh. When we moved down, I had to go to 2 different schools just because of geography, and then so by the age of 10, I was on my 5th school, and I was just like happy to be somewhere for a period of time, and in fact with my 2 kids, I've been really clear that we're not moving them around schools. We'll stay put, so they build up that rapport with. Create a community, which I didn't have. I think certainly in the days when I was at school, life was very different. So there was a lot of stuff that went on that you probably wouldn't tolerate today in quite the same way. But so different times.
Did you cry on the first day of being left there?
I cried probably for about the first 6 months, I think. My parents made a deal, and they said, if you want to leave at the end of the first year, you can. We won't stop you leaving, and I think it was just that sort of release of a bit of a pressure cooker, which is that it gave me an option. And by the summer term, I was having a whale of a time, and really got into it, and started to enjoy it. And I think, again, probably in those sort of first couple of terms, you tend to be, when you're that age, you tend to get picked on a lot by the older boys. We had dorm captains who weren't always the nicest of people, shall we say. But a lot of that changes over time. So,
I mean, one of these 2 people I mentioned, I think they said that they cried like you, but they've never cried since. It's almost like they'd put a cork in the well of emotions. Is that?
No, I cry a lot.
So do I, actually. But well, that's good, isn't it?
I think so. Again, I think that comes back to children. Probably having children, I feel much more kind of open, I suppose, as a person, and for good and bad. And but I don't have a problem with that. I think that's kind of a healthy thing to do in some ways.
What did you want to be when you were younger?
I wanted to be like my dad, and I've got a great photograph that I use if I ever give talks, and it's of my son when he was probably 5 or 6, sitting having breakfast next to my dad. And for some inexplicable reason, there's 5 different versions of butter or margarine on the table, which we've never
very posh hotel.
Quite figured out. I don't know why that was like that, but it's always a talking point. I remember my dad telling me about a young boy who I think was from Latin America, who was born with a hole in his face, and a colleague of my dad's helped rebuild this child's face over a number of years, and ultimately adopted him. I think that was the sort of end point. Boy David.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
Long time ago. Yeah. Right.
So that was my dad's colleague. It wasn't my dad that did it. It was my dad's colleague. Yeah. And I remember listening to him sort of tell these stories about the kind of the things that they would do, and how they would change people's lives. And I was like, wow, that's an amazing thing to do. But he also, the flip side of that was that he said that he spent most of his time rebuilding people's faces who'd come off motorbikes. So I was never having a motorbike.
Right.
And so I think I grew up wanting to do that. But I'm not smart enough to do that.
My dad also told me I was never going to have a motorbike, and I've got one as well.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll talk about motorbikes.
Well, you should, as parents, you should never say that, because they're always going to do the opposite, aren't they? Who was the first person that believed in you as a child?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to say something a bit weird, but it was probably the sort of house tutor, or whatever you call them, the house teacher of the first school I was at, because I remember going to him and saying that I'd got this crazy idea for trying to break the Guinness World Record for the most amount of people doing a three-legged race. And he kind of went, yeah, okay, let's figure out how to do that. And I remember writing to the Guinness Book of Records and saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to be on Aldborough Beach, and we bust in like hundreds and hundreds of boys and linked them all up walking down the beach, which was on a slope. And it took so long to get it done that, as I said, the boys at the end of it were actually in the sea.
So it's not three-legged; it's
hundreds of legs together.
It.
Yeah, but in one line.
Yeah.
And then there was another thing. I remember it was the summer of '84 concert at Wembley, and I said to him, can we get a load of boys together and go to this concert? And he's like, yeah, we'll do that. And I think it was just that sort of early acceptance of, if you can think of something, then okay, provided you're not going to do any damage or hurt somebody, it's probably okay to go and do it. So that. Apart from the sort of family stuff, that was probably...
Did you break the record?
No, we didn't, unfortunately.
Because the ones in the sea, they were actually swimming.
They were swimming, didn't count.
So left school, did you go to university or anything like that?
I failed my A-levels. I did quite well at O-levels and then flunked my A-levels. Lesson there, which is probably don't change schools between going from a boarding school, which is really structured and really... everything is controlled.
Right. So you just didn't do any work at the sixth form? Yeah,
sixth form, I discovered cars and got a girlfriend and all the rest of it, and probably didn't study quite as hard as I did. So I failed those, and then I resat them in the autumn. I got three basic passes, which got me in to a business course at Coventry, but it was a year late or a year later, and so in that intervening time, I ended up going and doing some, you call it interning today, I suppose. We didn't call it interning back then, but had a marketing department for a commercial refrigeration company, and I went to trade shows and discovered like marketing, and I was like, oh, this is amazing, this is what I should do. And then ended up going back after I started the course. I wrote to some firms in London, and through contacts that my dad had, and got offered summer internships, and that started my career ultimately. I never finished the course because they offered me a job part of the way through.
So that was at what age?
20.
Okay.
Yeah, so I turned up in London.
What's the gap between that and the big motorbike trip?
So that was probably 8 years, I guess, that I was working. I did 3 years at one agency in London, who were originally at Waterloo. I arrived a sort of naive 20-year-old, and I could see Big Ben out of the office window and thought I'd landed. It was amazing. And slept on the floor for a while at my uncle's office because I couldn't find anywhere to live. So he kindly let me do that. And and then
Not
lived
great for the other people coming in the morning.
No. They had a room. They had a room in the office.
Well,
They had
you weren't under the desk.
No. Mattress on the floor.
So it's quite an unusual thing to do, to disappear off on a motorbike at 28. Then, what prompted the trip?
There were a few people. I mean, Ted Simon's probably the most famous one. That if there are any bikers listening, they'll know about it. Jupiter's Travels. Jim Rogers was another one. He wrote a book called Investment Biker, and there were a few people. But I think it was we were talking just before this about serendipity and what happens and why. And I think my world sort of collided in a few different ways at the time. And one of them was reading Ted Simon's book, Jupiter's Travels, and it's such a beautifully written book. And I just decided that at that point in my career, I'd sort of gone as far as I'd wanted to go with what I was doing, and I was a bit of a free spirit and could go. And I was just like, okay, let's do this. To
me, when I've read a bit about it, it's a bit like a midlife crisis thing, but actually a lot earlier than most people have that.
Yeah, it's funny if you look back on it. It was a gift. I always think that sometimes life gives you gifts, and sometimes it's a sunrise in the morning, and sometimes it's a chance meeting. For me, it was a gift of, as I said, kind of getting to an end point with where I was with my career. I'd split up with my then fiance. I was not quite sure what to do. Read Ted Simon's book, and I was like, "That's what I'm going to do."
And you planned it to be 2 years, or was that?
No. I'd kind of I'd said to everybody I was going to go and ride around the world, not really having any kind of clue or planning for what that would entail. And I bought a motorbike and put it on a plane to Canada, and that was the planning that I'd done.
Okay, sounds like my planning. Actually.
Yeah, and I think that was the beauty of it. And I always say to people, if you're going to go traveling, don't book 10 flights, just book one, see where the road takes you. Because if you're always on a deadline to get to the next place, you'll never really settle into it.
Well, a lot of people have holidays like that, don't they?
Yeah,
they never actually absorb
enjoy
the place they're in. Yeah,
and I think for me, it was as much of an excuse to be able to get up and ride a motorbike every day as it was to see things. And Canada, riding across Canada and the States was a sort of safe bet traveling. I wasn't going to get into too much trouble.
Which
and then
wasn't the case later on in the trip, but
a little bit.
So the Honduras hurricane
Yeah.
was quite early on then in the trip, I guess, because there's a lot of the world after that.
I left I think on the 15th of April 1998, and then Mitch hit on October. It's actually today probably is the anniversary. It's the 30th of October today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow, see, there you go. That's serendipity, weird, whatever you want to call it.
So you still had 18 months of the trip left after that, and this, you say, is the moment that you started thinking about the lack of access to drinking water. So you had a lot of time to think about that on the rest of the trip, or is some of this more from hindsight and looking back?
I think I think part of it, and you talk about midlife crisis, and I don't call it a midlife crisis, but I thought that as I was off riding that I would figure out what to do with the rest of my life, what I wanted to do. Did I want to go back into marketing? Did I want to do something else? And I don't know where it came from, but I have, and I've still got it to this day. It's in my wallet at home. But I had a back of an envelope, and on this envelope I drew a little flow chart of all the things that I wanted to do, and one thing kind of led to another, and so on and so forth. And I look at it now, and it's pretty much ticked off every single one of those things that I thought that I probably wanted to do in life, and it sort of just figured itself out. I didn't necessarily think that I would end up doing what I am doing today, but I knew that I wanted to start a business of some sort. I knew I kind of wanted to do something that would benefit others in some way. I just wasn't sure what it was. So when it kind of all hooked up, you kind of go, "Oh, okay, that makes sense."
I mean, I don't call it midlife crisis either, but I think many people have an experience, can be any age really, but more common it is in the midlife, where they come to the end of themselves, and almost it quite often, and we talk about on this podcast, quite often successful people have had some big failure or trauma or something very dramatic happening, and it almost triggers a more fruitful, more wise second half of life when they're actually giving more back to the world. So what I was really saying there was you've kind of triggered that a bit earlier in your life than many people.
Yeah, yes, I don't disagree with that. I think trauma, in whatever shape or form it comes, whether you're young or old, ultimately has a bearing on what you decide to do after that. And I think you can see so many examples of that across the world. And probably it all leads to, more often than not, good in some way, because it makes you more reflective of the world in which we live and the people we surround ourselves with.
That said, there aren't many people that have achieved what you've achieved in terms of giving access to drinking water to that many people. You've got a massive, well, this isn't just me saying this is someone else I talked to about you. Very, very strong sense of direction and resilience, and what did he say? You can knock him down but never finish him.
I don't know who said that, but you can certainly finish me. I can, yeah.
But to do what the One brand has achieved and the One Foundation is massive, isn't it? But that requires a huge amount of focus. Where's that come from? This is what I'm trying to find out in these podcasts. What is it on the inside of Duncan Goose that has given him that drive and that determination to get a job done?
I think in very simple terms, without trying to oversimplify it in some ways, I think it's because I'm kind of answerable to people who are much, much less fortunate than any of us. And therefore, we have no right to complain. We have to do a bit better than we did yesterday to try and change somebody else's life. And I think a lot of it is to do with you have a very finite amount of time, on this planet. And it's like, the reason the brand was called One was because I set out to change one person's life one day at a time. And yes, we've done 5 million, but could it have been 10? Could it have been 20 million? And for me, that's a failure in some ways, because it's like, well, actually, what could I have done better that would have changed somebody else's life? So I think that the drive it probably comes from that, which is I have no right to complain when there are plenty of other people out there who are struggling.
Yes, but that answer says quite a lot about you, because many people don't think like that. They're thinking about mainly themselves, probably their family, extended family. They're not, when that is a very reflective answer, and I'm trying to find out where that comes from, to think in that kind of worldwide level rather than just, people thinking of each man for themselves.
I think a lot of it is to do with what happened on that 2-year motorbike trip. And I tell people, if they ever ask, it's like, if you get the chance to go traveling, go traveling. Don't go to the holiday destinations. Go and see where the real world is and how people live, because it will really open your eyes. As you know from
I'm
you've seen that. And I think that's probably where some of that drive comes from, is because you've seen those images and you've met those people and you've talked to them. And if I can just for a minute just give you an example of that, and I remember this vividly. I was in northern Kenya around the time of a very severe drought in the Sahel region up there, and I wouldn't normally go, but one of the news, I think it was Channel 5 News, had asked me if I would take them over and show them what we were doing over there. And I was like, yeah, okay, we'll go. And I wasn't really prepared for what I was going to experience. And there were two things, I think, that struck me. One of which was they were hanging, Médecins Sans Frontières were there, and they were hanging babies from harnesses in trees, weighing them. And the sight of a young child being suspended from a tree to see whether they would qualify to get what was called plumpy nut, which basically keeps them alive. It's like a peanut substitute, high protein thing. And that was a very moving experience to see how bad life can get for these families and for these children. Can you imagine if you're a parent and your child is there and all you want to do is feed them, and some aid agency is deciding based on their weight and how thick their arms are, they use these little tape measures to measure their jump, whether they get fed or not. I mean, it's horrific. And then on the same trip, I was sat with I do a lot of sitting down in the dirt talking to people, I find, when I'm overseas, because it's the best way to talk to people. And this lady was there with a 5-year-old child who was the same size as my newborn son at the time. And she'd walked 24 kilometers to get water, and only to discover that it was contaminated and people had died on the same walk from heat exhaustion. And I'm going like, this is nuts. You know, this is crazy stuff. And I think those kind of, let alone what happened on the motorbike trip, but what I kind of have seen in my, more recent professional life, these are things that create fire in you that go, pardon my French, but fuck this. It's just not going to be what's going to happen today. I mean, you talk about resilience in your book. And my wife gave me many years ago a little drawing of as she explained to it, a Gaussian curve. I was like, what's a Gaussian curve? And off the end of this Gaussian curve was a dot, and she'd written resilience on it. And she said, that's you. You're off the chart of resilience. But it's because I have something to fight for. If I was fighting for me, I don't think I would go that far with it.
How great it would be though if we cancel some. Every teenager cancel their education for 3 months and take them to Africa or Asia. We'd have a different world, wouldn't we?
I think so. And this is the great thing about this is what I say about people travel. When you are up close and personal to it, it really creates a different viewpoint on the world. And it's not just what goes on in Africa, but you look at the Middle East today and you wonder how on earth these people are managing really to do that. And we very recently with the foundation, I wanted to put some money into programs in Gaza, which is obviously highly controversial in one sense and highly risky in another. And there was one aid agency that was working there, and I'm like, these guys deserve the support that we can give them. And it went round and round and round in circles, and eventually the board agreed to do it. And I was just like, okay, so it's not millions of pounds, hundreds of thousands of pounds, but it will change somebody's life there for a short period of time, and we could do that. So let's do it.
So how would you say you've changed in the last 20 years, probably, since you started this work? It's more than 20 years, isn't it?
I think I've become more measured, probably. I remember in the very early days, and I'm not proud of this at all, but I remember slapping the meeting table once when we were sitting with the sales
better
team.
than slapping a person.
No, I've never slapped a person, but I just remember getting so angry with somebody and slapping the table, and I was so embarrassed about it. And I think now a lot of it is I'm much calmer than I used to be. I think the impact of those things that I saw made me want to go much faster, much harder than and now I kind of recognize I can't do everything. And I have to accept that there are limitations on me and on the team and on the business and what we can achieve and the foundation and what it can do and the rules around, can we give money to Gaza or not, and or anything like that. So I think I've become more I think I've become calmer, probably. That's probably the biggest thing. I accept the limitations of what we can do and can't do, and
some of that comes with age, isn't it? I think for me, I've probably become less impatient as I've got older.
Yeah. I think it changes. I think you soften. I would love to. I don't have it anymore, but I would love to have the drive that I had when I started. I remember at one point it was before the global recession of like 2010, and we were back then we were started to license the brand. So we don't just do water, but we did porridge that funded children's feeding programs. We did toilet tissue that funded latrines. We did all these kind of crazy things, all done under license. And we'd started bottling in the East Coast and West Coast of Australia, in South Africa, 5 points around the US. And I remember at one point I lived on an airplane. I think I did It was something crazy, like 29 international flights in 30 days. I mean, it was just utter madness. But it took that kind of oomph to get it going. And I think anybody that starts a business, those kind of early years is where the hard graft comes in.
Yes.
And I'd love to have it back, but I just don't think I could.
In some ways, but there's an expression I use. I think I probably do less now but achieve more, because it's a more
focus.
More reflective. I'll probably think more about what I do rather than being a bull in a china shop, which I definitely used to be. And there's a bit more wisdom involved with it, so I'm doing more of the right things, I guess. I
think that's the one gift of leadership, is that you can spend time thinking rather than doing.
But many leaders don't, do they? I mean, there's for most of my leadership, I was very much a doing leader and didn't really do any being. But generally, leaders should be being people, not doing people.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. One of our team is just leaving in the sales team, and I said, I'll pick up her accounts for a bit and I'll run them, and she handed them over, or she's just in the process of handing them over, and I looked at these and go, I can't do this. This is way beyond anything I'm capable of doing now. But I used to do it years ago. But I look at it now and go, no, that's I
I'm
can't.
The same. And actually, I was probably rubbish at it when I was doing those things.
I'm probably it's better off. And I then emailed the FD yesterday saying we need to find somebody quickly.
Recruitment crisis. What is your biggest regret?
I would like to think that I could have studied harder. Not because I didn't. So, flunked A levels. Okay. I didn't finish my course at Coventry because I got offered a job in London. And I sort of feel that there's a bit of that that's missing in some ways. Ironically, I got given an honorary doctorate from the University of Sunderland, which is brilliant because I'm technically a doctor.
Sorry, I'll have to change the introduction.
Much to the amusement of my family, who my wife's a doctor, my dad's a doctor. They study for years, actually, and then I get gifted one.
I can imagine you'd have been quite annoyed by that.
So, but I think it's. So I kind of regret not studying harder.
But what would that have given you?
I think probably the satisfaction of knowing that I could have got a degree or passed my levels or something like that. But actually, I think in hindsight, it probably would have sent me on a different trajectory. And actually, I ended up in marketing in a much more creative environment, which I think ultimately suited me more. And I didn't need A levels or a degree to get into that. So it probably worked in my favour. But I think I have a deeper curiosity of learning now. And I love ChatGPT because you can lose yourself down a rabbit hole, like learning more and more and more and more and reading things. So I think that would be my biggest regret, but I'm kind of okay with it.
We use the word spirituality sometimes in our business, but for different people it means different things. How would you define spirituality?
I think for me, it's really that my life has already been mapped out and I'm on a journey and I accept the ups and downs that come with it, and go to church, we take the kids, but it tends to be less and less, probably more now or less now than when they were little. I think that spirituality for me is a way of being rather than necessarily committing to one faith or one way of living.
Yeah, I mean, that's religion, isn't it? Which has probably done more damage than anything else in the world.
So I think for me, I remember many, many years ago, I didn't have a particularly good time of things. And I really hit rock bottom for a while. And when I was kind of on that journey, I was like, there's got to be a bottom to this and there's got to be a bounce. And I call it, when I talk to other people about it, I call it bounce, like you hit the bounce. Because you'll come up from it. Not everybody does, unfortunately. and there was an old colleague of mine wrote something on LinkedIn about it the other day, and we very sadly lost a colleague who didn't bounce. And I think that teaches you a lot of things about life and, you know, what's going to happen and how do you get out of it. But I look at that now back as part of that journey. You know, it's like something that was going to happen, and it happened, and what have I learned from it, and how do I apply that going forward? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of comfort in knowing or believing that you're on a journey, and you just ride out the good and the bad.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, well, we've kind of lost the seasons, haven't we, as well? So city dwellers have anyway. I know when I lived in London for 15 years, I think, you didn't notice the seasons, and when I moved out to the countryside, I thought the sun always rose in the east and set in the west, and it doesn't actually. It does at one point of the year, but it's northeast.
It's funny you say that. So I always sleep with the curtains open in the loft, so I can actually look out of a Velux and out some doors in the back, and I see that, and I see the transition of the moon, and sometimes I'll just watch it go past in the night. But the brilliant thing about being up there is that in the month of January, I get some absolutely cracking sunrises every day, and I always take photographs of them and just store them away in an album on my phone. And to your point, is because the sun is only there in January at that time of the day when I get up.
But I think because of that disconnection with nature, we've lost. I mean, life is seasonal, isn't it? There's summers, there's autumn.
Oh, I see what you mean in terms of life. Yeah. We think we live in the summer all the time.
We've lost the sense that actually there is no spring, there is no summer without winter.
Yes.
So a dying has to take place.
Yeah.
And we think, oh no, we can't do that. We can't do any dying. That's bad news.
Yeah.
But actually, it's normal. And the same with people's lives and their sense of oneness, I suppose, as a human being. We need to get that back, I think.
I think, again, it's almost having that sort of calmness. So you talk in your book about meditating and that period of reflection. And I think that's something that people are so busy that they don't stop and reflect. And there's a couple of things that I listen to sometimes when I want to kind of get that peace for 15 minutes or whatever it is, and give myself time to reflect. And the other thing that I do a lot of is doodling, and either online, just get a big artist pad,
right,
and or I use an iPad to do it on as well. But it's doodling thought processes rather than doodling drawings or designs, and creating those.
So that's your form of meditation.
Yeah. It's
what happens during that doodling? What's going on?
I think you start to see patterns emerge, and there are often answers to things that you can't quite put your finger on. But if you spend the time letting them just sort of naturally come to you, they tend to show themselves. The other thing, and I'm sure if you talk to the team, they'll say it annoys the heck out of them, but pretty much most days I'll be awake by between 5 and 6, and there will always be a thought that my brain will have processed overnight about, why aren't we doing this, or what's this different, or something like that. And I think that's your subconscious just filtering through stuff that you can't do in a conscious state.
Yeah.
And I think that comes back to those periods of reflection or meditation or whatever you want to call it or do it. And I think, again, it comes back to that people shouldn't spend all of their time rushing to achieve. They just need to spend time stopping and thinking sometimes.
Yeah, I do. I sometimes set my subconscious some homework when I'm asleep.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
I give it something to think about when I'm not thinking.
Yeah,
that sounds weird, but
no,
and then sometimes you do wake up and
go, oh yeah, that's
right.
Yeah, and it's amazing. There's this lovely book I mentioned to you just before we started, and it talks a lot about neural pathways and how those how your brain works in that conscious or subconscious state. And it's actually been adopted by a lot of companies now about how do they actually get their employees to create that state of flow. I mean, you talk about it in your book as well. And there was something like there's a great, do you know the 9 dots challenge?
Yes.
Four lines, 9 dots, and 5% of people can do it in under 10 minutes. But when you do it in a sort of subconscious or meditative state, it goes up to about 40%. So
interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So that's what we should all be daydreaming and sleeping.
Think outside the dots.
Yeah, exactly.
When do you feel most emotionally connected to yourself?
Oh, that's easy. When I'm outdoors, and when I'm outdoors in space, like just open space.
Oh right,
and
not
in the spaceship. No. Yeah, I struggled a lot when I came back to London after being away for 2 years, having pretty much lived on the road and discovered that most of the world isn't built up, and that there is so much space around you, and there's so much peace in nature. I remember particularly one time I was going through Iran, and it was in the middle of this desert in Iran, and I just stopped on the side of the road and turned the motorbike off, and it was like being in a vacuum. That you couldn't hear anything. There was nothing, and it was the most calm, peaceful place you could possibly imagine. And trying to find that peace and quiet is difficult today, particularly living in London. But then there's other ways. Again, riding a motorbike is almost the same. It's like you are stuck in a helmet. There is nothing that you can do, listen to, watch. It is you by yourself. And I think those moments of peace they're in space, they're in nature, and they're very calming.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I have a coach called Giles Hutchins. He does all his coaching in his woods in Sussex, and that's it. He just lives there, and people go down. But it's so much better. You can hear better in those spaces, I think.
Yeah, again, it's about gifts. That's a gift, and we don't use it, and we should. So
let's talk a bit about the future. Obviously, you say you could have done more, but you've done a hell of a lot. What's going to be happening in the next 5 years with you and with One Foundation, One Brand? Well,
I wrote something today that we want to try and hit, having helped 8 million people by 2030. So that's another 3 million on top of the 5 that we've done. And I looked at it on a piece of paper, and I thought, how realistic is that? And how do we do that? What does it look like? It's a bit different. The world has moved on, but I think that's a good goal. 2030 for me is a very pivotal year in many ways. It's the end of the Sustainable Development Goals. I was in New York for the signing of those,
right,
and which was an amazing experience. And I followed the progress of the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals over the years. And 2030 is the end of it. I will be 62. I feel that's the right time to bow out if I can do that, and I would like to leave going, I feel that I've done a good job. I think you look back at it and go, I could probably have done a better job, but will I be happy with what we've achieved? Yeah, I think so. I think it's an amazing legacy for so many people, not just for me, but for you. I mean, you've had a role in that, and your team's had a role in that, and that's part of their legacy. And I think, to be able to walk out and say thank you to a lot of people will be amazing.
Is there a unique gift that you haven't shared with the world yet?
No, I don't think so. I'm not sure where you're going with that, but no, I don't think I have any particularly unique
Well, I can't
gifts.
imagine you might hand this over, but I can't imagine you stopping there.
So
62 is the new 42, isn't it?
Well, it is. It is. There are a couple of things that I've just qualified as an advanced motorcyclist. I've been training with the police and the Met Police for the last 6 to 9 months to learn to ride a motorbike in a very different way. And the reason I did that is because I want to become what's called a blood biker, who deliver emergency blood to hospitals.
I've seen them. Yeah.
And although I think the definition of being an emergency biker in London is different than perhaps other parts of the country, but I wanted to do something over and above what I do with one. I wanted it to be connected to motorbikes in some way if I could. They've also, off the back of that, asked me if I would become a trainer for other people to do that. And my initial reaction was, no, it's been so stressful just trying to learn how to do this and to ride to that standard that I just need a bit of a break from it. But maybe I'll become a trainer. And I think I just like to try and help others avoid some of the things that I've learned along the way. So there's a bit of, I don't know, mentoring, advice. I kind of like, whenever I give a talk, I always say to people, if they want a coffee and a chat, come and talk to me. And that offer always stands. And because, you will have had many, experiences through your own business. I particularly like the chapters about warehouse systems being problematic and things like that. And I was like, yeah, I can relate to that. But you will have so many learnings that you can pass on to people starting, and I think again that's a bit of giving back. So if we can do that, and if we can afford to do that, then that's brilliant.
Has your dad got used to having Is he still alive?
He's still alive, yeah.
So what's he think of all this motorbiking now then?
I think he's got all right with it. He's got used to it. Yeah.
What do you think would be on your tombstone?
He tried. I think that's probably about it. I think that my daughter, who's now 14, when she was much younger, she was probably, I don't know, 5 or 6, maybe not even that. And she was on a climbing frame, one of these big kind of wooden climbing frame structures. And we were a bit worried about her going up it. And she turned to my wife and said, "Don't worry, Mummy, it's good to try." And I thought, never has somebody been so true. And I think that it's to try is important. It's okay to fail, but it's a failure not to try. And I think I've tried, and that's changed somebody's life and created a business and done some good, and that's okay.
I'll tell you what someone else said when I asked them about this question for you. They said I would put relentlessly devoted to changing the world.
Well, that's a bit much. I think that's a bit much.
You would say that, wouldn't you? But the thing is, when we're dead, we don't get to decide.
Yeah, that's true.
It is someone else. So that's probably more likely than what you said. If there was one lesson you would want to leave behind on your deathbed to other people that you've learnt, what would it be? I
think the thing that I try and instill in my children is to be happy. Well, there are probably 2 things, if I'm allowed 2 things. So one would be to be happy with who you are, because there will always be somebody brighter. There will always be somebody richer, somebody better looking, somebody, and there will always be somebody poorer, and there will always be somebody worse off. And you have to be happy with who you are. And I think that goes back to that sense of calm. I think I'm happy with who I am today. I think it's taken me a while to get there, but I'm okay with that. I'm not the smartest kid on the block. I'm not the richest person in the room, but I have an amazing life. I am so grateful to be here and to have the life that I do. And it's not without problems. Everybody has problems, but it's amazing. So I think that's one thing. It's about being happy with who you are. And the other one, really, and I try and instill this a lot in my children, is about financial understanding. And I think the world is just getting harder and harder and harder for people. And if you can't build in some financial resilience, and particularly to children, and teach them how to manage money, then I think you're on a difficult trajectory as you get older. And I suspect that will probably only get harder. So it's like, how do we teach people?
Why do you think it's getting harder?
Well, I mean, as a business person, I mean, with today's the budget,
my phone's been off.
You don't want to look at it. No. Actually, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. But there's definitely some tricky things in there. But if you look at all the costs associated with doing business, they seem to keep laddering up. And whether that's new taxes on packaging, environmental, EPR and things like that. If you look at changes in employers' national insurance, it's going up again. If you look at capital gains tax, it's going up, and so on and so forth. Cost of borrowing now is a lot higher than it was, 5 years ago, pre-COVID. It's become harder to be in business. If your salary hasn't changed over time, cost of living has dramatically gone up. And so how do you weather these storms? Because if you're living at the edge of your financial capability, there is no buffer there for when things go wrong. And I see a lot of this in our work, when just in Malawi recently got hit by a cyclone, zero resilience in that country for that kind of impact. And everybody starts over again, and they've gone backwards. They haven't stayed still. They've gone backwards, and I think that's an issue in this country. So people, they need to build a buffer. They need to plan for, having a money set aside for when things go wrong, because they will.
So I did set you a bit of homework, and I asked these 3 questions to all my guests. And the first one is, tell me one piece of advice you wish you'd had when you started out, but didn't have, obviously. It's implied in the question. So, piece of advice you wish you had that you didn't.
I think it goes back to financial resilience. And when I started, everybody said, you can't create a company that gives all its money away. And kind of proved them right and wrong. So the fact that we've done what we've done is proof that I'm right. The fact that we are always scrabbling around for money is proof that they're right. And I think that it's very difficult. People always say there's 2 things that you'll never have enough of in business, and it's time and money. And that is so true. You can work 18 hours a day, and we all have. And we've worked 7 days a week, and we've worked through holidays and everything else, and you can do that. But if you haven't got the money there to enable you to do the things that you need to get done, or to hire the right people, or to invest in the way, it's really hard. And so I always say to people, don't follow us as a business model, follow somebody that's slightly less generous.
And one piece of well-meaning advice that you've completely ignored.
Probably the same. You can't start a business and give all the money away. Yeah,
you haven't ignored it.
Yeah, no, there was a great piece of advice that Archie Norman gave me many years ago, and he said, "Don't be a brand." And he said, "Don't be a halo with a brand. Be a brand with a halo." And what he meant by that was, stop trying to be so good, and actually focus on being commercial with a halo, rather than trying to just do everything good. And I still haven't listened to him.
And the last question from my book, The Fourth Bottom Line, one of the 50 leadership characteristics you think you're most needing to still work on?
I'm not actually going to choose that. I'm going to choose the last one, which from memory is day 50 good, and because we can all be better. And so you talk about something you can work on, and I like this one the most, because it doesn't matter how good you are in business, you can always be better. I also like it. I think that was is that the one with Desmond Tutu in it as well?
Yeah.
And
because you got a picture of him in your hallway, apparently.
Yes, yeah, with my wife and a couple of friends, and we got invited to meet him, and then actually ended up going out for dinner with him. And he was the most amazing. I've met a lot of quite high profile people over the years, from presidents and prime ministers, but Desmond Tutu is the one that is in the hall. Everybody else is in the upstairs toilet. And he was just such a man, full of heart and character and warmth and understanding and openness, and you just got that sense in droves, if that's the right expression, but just an amazing gentleman, and if he didn't embody good, then I don't know who does.
That's a good place to end. Thanks, Duncan, so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of The Fourth Bottom Line. Please hit subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode, and leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to learn more about my work, follow me on LinkedIn, visit my website, paulhargreaves.co.uk, or look out for my 2 books, Forces for Good and The Fourth Bottom Line. Thank you for listening.